When Barron Trump stepped out of his SUV that frozen January morning in 2024, he wasn't expecting to meet the homeless man who would change not just his life, but the lives of hundreds of New York City's forgotten youth. What happened next would shock millions, but not for the reasons anyone expected. The man was Michael Chen, a former Google software engineer who now called Manhattan streets his home. 2 years ago, he was living the American dream in a Brooklyn brownstone with his wife Sarah and their daughter Emily. "We had everything," he says, his fingers hovering over the cracked screen of his old MacBook Pro. Until Emily's diagnosis. Rare diseases don't care about insurance caps or savings accounts. In just 14 months, the Chen family went from planning Emily's college applications to selling their home to pay for experimental treatments. When Sarah left with Emily to live with family in California, Michael made an unexpected choice. He would stay behind in New York, using his remaining resources not to rent an apartment, but to buy laptops and tablets. "Everyone thought I'd lost my mind," Michael explains. "But I saw something in these streets that others missed. Hundreds of brilliant kids with no access to technology, no way to learn the skills that could break the cycle of poverty. I figured if I couldn't save my own daughter's future, maybe I could help save someone else's." What began as one homeless man offering free coding lessons outside a public library soon grew into an underground network. Maria Gonzalez, a 16-year-old daughter of undocumented immigrants, became his first student. Within 3 months, she had built an app to help her parents' food truck business. Word spread through the city's teenage population like wildfire. But not everyone appreciated Michael's unorthodox teaching methods. The local business improvement district had tried to have him removed multiple times. Private schools complained about a homeless man attracting the wrong element to their pristine sidewalks. Yet Michael persisted, moving his informal classroom from spot to spot. That's what brought him face to face with Barron Trump on that winter morning. But as the youngest Trump approached the homeless teacher, neither man knew that Maria Gonzalez was rushing toward them with news that would turn their confrontation into something nobody could have predicted, least of all the millions who would soon watch it unfold on their phones. 3 months before their encounter, Barron Trump had started questioning everything about his privileged life. While his classmates stressed about college applications and summer internships, he found himself drawn to a different kind of education happening right outside his school's gates. Every morning, he'd watched from his classroom window as groups of public school students gathered around a homeless man with a laptop. At first, his friends had joked about it. Probably some crypto scam, they'd said. But Barron noticed something else. These kids weren't just hanging around. They were coding. He'd overheard snippets of their conversations, Python tutorials, JavaScript debugging, app development. The homeless man wasn't begging, he was teaching. And from what Barron could tell, he was teaching at a level that rivaled their school's $50,000 a year computer science program. "I'd never told anyone this," Barron admits, "but I started recording the lessons on my phone." The way he explained complex coding concepts, it was better than any tutorial I'd ever seen. I knew he wasn't just some random person. He knew what he was talking about. As the son of a man who'd built an empire, Barron recognized opportunity when he saw it. But it wasn't the kind of opportunity his family typically pursued. This was something different, something that made him question everything he thought he knew about success, failure, and the razor-thin line between them. Maria Gonzalez had noticed him watching. During her morning coding sessions, she caught glimpses of the tall teenager in the window, taking notes. "I knew who he was, of course," she says. "Everyone did. But what interested me more was what he was writing down. He wasn't just observing us like we were some kind of zoo exhibit. He was actually learning." The school administration had been trying to remove Michael for weeks, citing security concerns. But every time the police came, they found nothing illegal about a man teaching free coding classes on a public sidewalk. Still, pressure was mounting. Several parents had complained about their children having to walk past that vagrant every morning. What nobody knew was that Barron had been secretly intervening, using his family's influence behind the scenes to protect Michael's makeshift classroom. But on that January morning, as Maria raced toward them with tears streaming down her face, everything was about to change. The true reason for Michael's presence outside that particular school was finally going to come to light, and it had nothing to do with teaching code. Maria reached them just as Barron stepped out of his SUV. "Mr. Chen," she called out, clutching a tablet to her chest. "They found Emily. The treatment, it worked." Michael's hands trembled as he read the email on Maria's tablet. His daughter's experimental gene therapy had succeeded where all other treatments had failed. But the victory felt hollow. The hospital bill was nearly 7 figures, far beyond what Sarah's family could manage. Meanwhile, Barron stood frozen on the sidewalk, his security detail tensing as they assessed the situation. He'd planned this moment for weeks, rehearsing what he'd say to the homeless coding teacher. But now, watching the scene unfold, he realized there was much more to the story. "Your daughter," Barron said, stepping forward. "She was treated at Goldman Memorial, wasn't she?" The security guards moved to block him, but he waved them back. "The gene therapy trial. The one my mother helped fund." Michael looked up sharply. The pieces suddenly clicked into place. Goldman Memorial Hospital. The mysterious anonymous donor who'd been keeping the trial running. The reason his daughter had gotten a spot in the program despite the waiting list. "I did my research," Barron continued, his voice steady despite the growing crowd of onlookers. "You're not just some random homeless teacher. You're Michael Chen. You wrote half the code that powers the hospital's patient management system. The system my father's companies use." The crowd of students gathering around them grew larger. Among them were Michael's coding students, phones raised, live streaming everything. This wasn't how either man had planned their confrontation. "I don't want your family's money," Michael said, his voice raw with emotion. "I've made enough to get off these streets 3 times over from my freelance work. I stayed because these kids needed me. Because teaching them gave me purpose when I thought I'd lost everything." "I know," Barron replied. "That's not why I'm here." He pulled out his phone, showing Michael a familiar-looking app interface. "I reverse-engineered your daughter's medical tracking app. The one you built for her. I think I found a way to make it work for everyone. Not just the rich kids who can afford private hospitals." Maria stepped forward, her eyes wide. "That's what I've been trying to tell you, Mr. Chen. The app Barron and I built, we presented it to the hospital board last week. They want to implement it nationwide. But we need the original creator's permission." The crowd fell silent as Michael stared at the app on Barron's phone. But it wasn't the elegant code or the streamlined interface that caught his attention. It was the name, Emily's List, making medical care accessible for all. The growing crowd of students fell silent as Michael's hands began to shake. Not from the cold, but from a surge of emotions he couldn't contain. "You named it after my daughter?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "She inspired it," Barron replied, stepping closer despite his security team's visible discomfort. "But we need more than just your permission. We need you. Your expertise. Your experience. The hospital board has questions only you can answer." Michael let out a bitter laugh that echoed off the school's stone facade. "You don't understand. I can't walk into a hospital boardroom looking like this." He gestured to his worn clothes, his unkempt appearance. "I'm not the same person who built that system." "That's where you're wrong," Maria interjected, pulling out more files on her tablet. "Show him, Barron. Show him what we found." Barron swiped through his phone, revealing email after email. Hundreds of them, from doctors and nurses across the country. All talking about a mysterious debugging service that had been quietly fixing medical software issues for free. A service that only operated between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m., when most hospital systems underwent maintenance. "You never stopped working, did you?" Barron asked. "You've been maintaining the hospital systems this whole time. For free. Using public library Wi-Fi and your cracked laptop." The crowd of students murmured as they continued filming. Michael's coding students looked at each other with dawning recognition. The late-night debugging sessions, the dark circles under his eyes during morning lessons, the way he sometimes dozed off while teaching. I couldn't let it fail, Michael admitted. Those systems, they keep people alive. Track medications. Monitor vital signs. One bug could mean someone else's daughter doesn't make it. The hospital board knows, Barron said quietly. They've known for months. They want to hire you back. Not as an employee, as head of their new patient advocacy division. With full medical benefits that would cover Emily's ongoing care. Michael stared at him in disbelief. Why are you doing this? Why would Barron Trump care about some homeless programmer and his sick daughter? Barron's next words caught everyone off guard. Because 2 years ago, I found something in my father's medical software system. A bug that could have killed thousands. And an emergency patch uploaded at 3 a.m. signed with your digital signature. You saved my father's life, Mr. Chen. You just never knew it. The live stream viewers skyrocketed as students shared the unfolding drama. Comments flooded in, is this real? That homeless guy saved Trump's life? Plot twist of the century. But the real shockwave was yet to come. That bug, Michael said, his voice catching. The medication interaction error in the cardiac ward system. I remember that night. I almost didn't catch it. Almost went to sleep instead. He looked at Barron with new understanding. Your father was in the hospital then? Emergency heart procedure, Barron confirmed. Kept out of the media. The doctor said if that bug hadn't been patched. He left the sentence unfinished. But that's not even the craziest part. Show him the rest, Maria. Maria pulled up a final document on her tablet. The money that funded Emily's experimental treatment? It wasn't just from Mrs. Trump. She handed the tablet to Michael, whose eyes widened as he read. The document showed a series of anonymous donations to Goldman Memorial's gene therapy program. Each one traced back through a complex web of foundations and charitable trusts. But the source was clear, a coding education nonprofit funded entirely by apps built by Michael's students. Your students did this, Barron explained. Every app they built, every program they sold. Maria set it up so a percentage went to the hospital's research fund. They've been helping save Emily this whole time, they just didn't know whose daughter they were saving. The crowd of students surged forward as Michael's former pupils realized what they'd accomplished. James Chen, a junior from the Bronx, had sold his delivery routing app to local restaurants. Sophia Patel's language learning program had been bought by 3 school districts. Each small success had contributed to the fund. We thought you were just teaching us to code, Maria said, tears streaming down her face. But you taught us so much more. You showed us we could build things that matter. That could help people. Michael stood speechless, surrounded by the students he thought he was helping, students who had ended up helping him instead. But it was Barron's next move that would send the livestream into a viral frenzy. The youngest Trump pulled out a wrinkled envelope from his jacket. This is my letter of intent to Goldman Memorial Hospital. I'm deferring college for a year to help roll out Emily's list nationwide. He handed the envelope to Michael. But only if you'll run it with me. Not as a consultant or an employee, as a partner. The livestream comments section exploded. Screenshots of Barron's job offer were already trending on social media, but few noticed Michael's initial reaction. He didn't reach for the envelope. Instead, he turned to his students. Before I answer, Michael said, addressing the crowd of teenagers who gathered around them, I need to know something. How many of you would keep coming to learn if I wasn't homeless anymore? If I had an office, a title, a salary? The response was immediate and overwhelming. You kidding? We have an actual classroom, shouted James from the back. With heating, added Sophia, generating laughs from the shivering crowd. But it was a quiet voice from the edge of the group that caught everyone's attention. A 12-year-old boy pushed forward, clutching a battered Chromebook. Mr. Chen, I started coming to your classes because you were homeless, he admitted. Because my family is too. But I kept coming because you treated me like I could be somebody. Like being homeless wasn't who I was, just where I was. Barron stepped forward, still holding out the envelope. That's exactly why it has to be you, he said. Emily's list isn't just about medical software. It's about seeing people really seeing them. All of them. Michael finally took the envelope, but didn't open it. Instead, he pulled out his cracked laptop one last time. Then let's make it official, he said, fingers flying across the keyboard. Live, right here, with everyone watching. The students crowded around as Michael accessed the hospital's public code repository. In real time, thousands of viewers watched as he uploaded the original source code for Emily's medical tracking system with one crucial modification. I'm releasing it as open source, he announced, causing Barron's eyes to widen. Free for any hospital, anywhere in the world, to use and modify. But with two conditions. He turned to Maria. First, we maintain oversight of all implementations. Quality control, security, training, everything. And the second condition? Barron asked. Michael gestured to his gathered students. 10% of all licensing and support fees go to a new foundation. One that provides tech education and coding camps for homeless youth and families in crisis. Because everyone deserves a chance to build something that matters. As Michael hit enter, finalizing the code release, his phone buzzed. A new email from Sarah. A photo of Emily, smiling from her hospital bed, holding up a sign, "Dad, you did it. We're coming home." The real-time viewer count hit 1 million just as Barron did something that would cement the video's place in social media history. Without warning or hesitation, Barron Trump took off his expensive school blazer and handed it to his security detail. Then, in front of hundreds of phones recording the moment, he sat down on the cold sidewalk next to Michael's laptop, pulled out his own, and began to code. If we're doing this live, he said, let's do it right. I've got some improvements to the patient interface I want to show you. He looked up at the stunned crowd. Well? Isn't this a coding class? Within minutes, the scene transformed. Students from both the private school and Michael's regular coding group sat in a circle on the sidewalk, expensive uniforms next to worn hoodies, all focused on their screens. The heir to a fortune and a homeless teacher, debugging software that could save lives. Social media couldn't get enough. Hashtag sidewalk coding and hashtag Barron and Michael started trending globally. But it was the live stream comments from healthcare workers that really caught fire. My hospital needs this now, wrote an ER nurse from Chicago. Our current system crashes 3 times a week. A doctor from a rural clinic in Kansas chimed in, could this help us track patients who can't afford regular care? Maria, who had been quietly filming everything, suddenly grabbed everyone's attention. Mr. Chen, you need to see this. She turned her tablet around, showing a live news feed. Other tech companies were responding to the viral moment in real time. 3 major Silicon Valley firms had just pledged matching funds for the Homeless Youth Coding Foundation. A leading cloud services provider offered free hosting for Emily's list. Even Michael's former employer, Google, released a statement, "We're proud to see our former team leader continuing to innovate for social good, and we'd like to help." But the most surprising response came from an unexpected source. Sarah, watching the live stream from Emily's hospital room in California, had started her own impromptu broadcast. Emily, still weak but smiling, held up a series of handwritten signs. "Dad, remember what you always told me? Problems are just solutions waiting to be coded. I think we just found our solution. P.S. Can I take Barron's coding class too?" The moment Emily's message went live, splitting screens across social media, Michael made a decision that would change not just his life, but the future of healthcare accessibility in America. Michael stood up, drawing everyone's attention. "Barron, I accept your partnership offer," he announced, "but with one condition of my own." The live stream chat held its collective breath. The sidewalk classes continue. No matter what. Rain, shine, or board meetings. Barron didn't hesitate. Done. But I have a better idea than the sidewalk. He turned to face his school's imposing entrance. My father may own buildings, but my mother taught me the importance of education. I've already spoken to the school board. He gestured toward the school's state-of-the-art computer lab, visible through the ground floor windows. Starting next week, it's open to everyone for free coding classes after hours. Private school, public school, no school, doesn't matter. Michael teaches whoever wants to learn. The school's headmaster, who had been watching from the doorway, stepped forward with an expression that silenced the excited murmurs. Everyone expected opposition, but what he said next stunned them all. Mr. Trump came to me 3 weeks ago with this proposal, the headmaster revealed. He offered to fund the entire program from his trust fund. I told him to keep his money. The crowd tensed. Because the school will fund it instead. What kind of educational institution would we be if we didn't support education for all? The announcement set off a chain reaction. Private schools across Manhattan began calling, offering their facilities for evening coding classes. Public schools proposed partnerships. The city's tech firms started reaching out about internship programs. But it was a message from Emily that put everything in perspective. Her nurse held up a phone showing her vital signs, monitored by the very system her father had built and maintained while homeless. "See those numbers, Dad?" Emily said through the video call, her voice weak but determined. "That's what hope looks like in code. Now imagine every kid getting the same chance I did." Michael looked around at his students, from the homeless 12-year-old to the trust fund teenagers, all coding together on the sidewalk. Then he looked at Barron, who had removed his tie and was helping Maria debug a hospital interface module. "When do we start?" Michael asked, but he already knew the answer. They had started weeks ago, with a homeless man's free coding lessons and a privileged teenager who saw past appearances to recognize what really mattered. 3 hours after the live stream began, the story had taken on a life of its own. #CodeForAll and #BarronMichael partnership were trending worldwide. But in the midst of the viral chaos, something extraordinary was happening on that Manhattan sidewalk. The impromptu coding class hadn't ended. If anything, it had grown. Local tech workers on their lunch breaks had joined the circle. A retired computer science professor brought hot coffee for everyone. Parents started arriving, not to pull their kids away, but to sit down and learn alongside them. "This is what I always dreamed of," Michael told the still-rolling cameras, but could never quite achieve alone. Not just teaching code, but breaking down the walls between different worlds. Barron, who had been quietly working on his laptop, suddenly stood up. "It's done," he announced. "The first official action of our partnership." He turned his screen around, showing a newly launched website, the Trump Initiative for Technical Education and Healthcare Innovation. The site already had hundreds of signups from schools across the country wanting to replicate their program. But it was the healthcare component that caught everyone's attention. Hospitals were flooding in with requests to implement Emily's list, offering to contribute to both the development and the educational foundation. Then came the moment that brought tears to even the most hardened viewers. Emily's doctor appeared on the livestream, holding up her latest test results. "The treatment worked," he announced. "Emily's in remission. And thanks to this program, she won't be the last. We're already identifying other candidates who previously couldn't afford to participate in the trial." Michael, overwhelmed, sat down on the sidewalk. His students, both old and new, gathered around him supportively. But it was Barron's next announcement that would cement the day's legacy. "My first act as a partner," he declared, pulling out a new document, "is to establish a permanent home for our work." He handed the papers to Michael. "The Chin Center for Technical Innovation will occupy the entire 5th floor of Goldman Memorial Hospital. One half for medical software development, one half for free coding education. A place where healthcare and hope intersect." The papers trembled in Michael's hands as he read them. The lease was already signed. The funding secured. And there, at the bottom, was a handwritten note from Emily. "Dad, I saved you a desk right next to mine. Time to come home." 1 month later, Michael Chin stood in front of the Chin Center's glass doors, no longer wearing worn-out clothes but a simple business suit. Next to him, Barron Trump was dressed in jeans and a coding bootcamp t-shirt. The contrast wasn't lost on the media gathered to cover the opening. "People keep asking me why I did it," Barron addressed the crowd, "why I gave up a year of college to work with a man who was teaching code on the streets. They're missing the point. I didn't give up anything. I gained everything." Sometimes the best teachers aren't in classrooms, and the most valuable lessons don't come from textbooks. The doors opened, revealing a state-of-the-art facility filled with students from all walks of life. Emily, now strong enough to attend in person, sat at a coding station helping a young girl from the homeless shelter learn basic Python. Maria led an advanced app development class, while James demonstrated his expanded delivery routing software to potential investors. "1 month ago, I was a homeless man with a broken laptop and a dream of making a difference," Michael began. "Today, we've helped implement Emily's list in 17 hospitals across the country. Our coding programs have expanded to 30 schools. But that's not what makes this successful." He gestured to a wall displaying photos of their journey, the original sidewalk classes, the viral confrontation, the spontaneous coding circle that brought everyone together. Success isn't about buildings or programs or even code. It's about what happens when we stop seeing labels and start seeing people. The live stream that had started it all was playing on a loop in the lobby, but with a new ending added. It showed clips of lives changed, homeless youth landing tech jobs, patients getting life-saving treatments, privileged kids learning empathy alongside coding syntax. Barron stepped forward one last time. "A lot of people called this a feel-good story about a rich kid and a homeless man. But it's more than that. It's proof that when we blur the lines between giving and receiving, between teaching and learning, between privilege and purpose, that's when real change happens." As the ceremonies concluded, Emily joined her father at the podium. She held up one final sign, but this time it wasn't just for him. It was for everyone. In a world of ones and zeros, of haves and have-nots, the most powerful code we can write is the one that brings people together. Because every person has value, every story has meaning, and every line of code we write can be the beginning of someone else's solution. Michael looked out at the faces in the crowd, his students, both old and new, rich and poor, from every background imaginable. "The real secret," he said, "is that we're all just temporary variables in each other's code. The trick is figuring out how to make our values add up to something greater than ourselves." As the camera panned out for one final shot, showing the diverse group of students, teachers, and dreamers all working together, the message was clear: in a world that often divides us by what we have or don't have, the greatest wealth is our ability to enrich each other's lives. And sometimes, the most valuable things we can offer are the very things we thought we'd lost: our purpose, our dignity, and our power to make a difference, one line of code at a time.